My name is DAvid Lubliner. I'm a co-PI on a National Science Foundation grant called Engage. We're one of 30 engineering schools teaching 3D spatial visualization skills to freshmen. All the data suggests that students who have these 3D spatial visualization skills, which means to visualize and rotate three-dimensional objects, not only do better in their fields, get better grades, but the graduation rate is a lot higher. So on the screen, I'm going to show you some examples of some of the topics that we're going to discuss in the course. When you look at a three-dimensional cube rotating, this is relatively simple because it's a square surface and you know what to expect. But if you're trying to visualize something more complex, being able to visualize, draw, design it really helps in your understanding and presenting it to other people. So here's an example of a picture of Einstein's theory of curved space-time. It suggests that all planets, large bodies, bend space-time, as you'll see over here, and when time and space is bent, a person in a spacecraft traveling, even though he's traveling in a straight line, will actually be moving in a curved trajectory in orbit. Trying to visualize something like this is really critical to understand, the physics behind how gravity works. So the course is going to give examples not only in 3D objects, physics, mechanical engineering, architecture, to try to illustrate some of those points. The textbook that we're going to be using is Developing Spatial Thinking. Here's the ISBN number. It can be ordered on Amazon. There's also, as part of the, I think it's $25 price, there's some software that's downloaded with homework examples. And there are examples in the textbook. At the end of every lesson, it's going to suggest that you do these homework examples. In multiple fields, engineering fields, for example, if you're designing an engine or a molecular configuration or a architecture of this is the Beijing Stadium, Olympic Stadium 2008. I'll show you some more examples. How do you design an object unless you can think about and visualize how the object is going to function? What I'm going to do is show you a little animation here of an engine. This was done in Design Studio 3D. It's available on the NJIT campus. And basically what it does is an animation of first it starts with a piston where gas is shot in, and the red, so the blue is the gas, the red is when the spark ignites the gas, pushes the piston down, and shows the process. And the second, what it's going to do is then show you how the pistons are in a multi-cylinder engine and how the up and down movement is turned into rotational speed. So as you can see, it's a very complex picture, and if you're going to sit and design it, you have to understand what are the rules for orthographic, isometric drawings. There are some rules that are proven to be taught on how to design in visual objects. And here's an example of what the engine would look like as it's firing. Again, as an engineer, designing a device like this is critical to be able to visualize it before you create it. Here's an example in architecture. The reason I'm showing you these is that there are applications to visualizing three-dimensional objects and drawing and constructing them in just about any field. Architecture. This is the Beijing sports stadium used in 2008. Unbelievable design. What I want to show you is, depending on how you look at it, it's a totally different structure. So being able to visualize it is an important part of the design process. So the first large picture is looking at the stadium as if you're walking in. The next one here is basically what the stadium looks like, from a elevated, like 30-degree point of view. Very different from the first one. It looks like a curved donut with the center of it open, and anyway, a beautiful design. But what does it look like from the inside? The inside of the stadium is just as spectacular, is that all the seating and the curved views give you a sense of you're in someplace unique and special, and it's curved to indicate movement because it was for the sports and Olympics. The next one is basically what it looks like at night. And this is really interesting, is that the opening is lighted, and it's also during the day as light streams in, kind of mirrors the circumference of the field and gives you a whole different perspective. So designing the stadium, as you can see, it's pretty obvious. You should be able to visualize the whole object. I'm going to show you again a 3D graphics example of once you've got it, then you've got to create a CAD design that you can show to people. So here is a little animation of taking the stadium and rotating it from multiple perspectives. Plus you can see the environment behind it, bridges, other buildings. So I'm just trying to give you, a little indication of how important these skills are, especially in engineering curriculum. All right, so I'm going to do a little boring stuff now just to let you know. Again, I'm talking about a 5 or 10 week online e-learning course that will teach you how to do spatial visualization. So what is spatial visualization? Ability to mentally manipulate 2- and 3-dimensional figures. Visual thinking is the process of processing using the part of the brain that is emotional, creative, to organize information in an intuitive way. Why do spatial visualizations? It's considered a primary skill that you really need to be successful in science and engineering. This is a study that has been going on for about 10 years. We're one of 30 colleges, and it's specifically important in designing objects. Can they be learned? Absolutely. Well, at the end of the course, you're going to take a pre-test online that's going to indicate how your skills are before, a post-test afterwards, and it's going to indicate whether you've had some improvements. And the answer is all the studies are yes, it can be learned. We're going to talk about 3 general areas: topological, projective, and Euclidean skills. Okay, topologicals are 2D skills, how you determine distance. You have an object, and one is behind it. Yes, we have a perspective. Things get smaller as they are further in the distance. All these skills that we take for granted, those are part of the visualization skills. Projective skills is what is a 3D object look. This is going to be the one we're going to spend the most work on how do you teach you the actual isometric and processes of generating a 3-dimensional surfaces so that you can break them into separate X, Y, and Z perspectives and then actually assemble them into a 3-dimensional figure. Euclidean skills are basically the actual putting data and numbers to these values so that it's not, I think an object looks this way, but exactly what are the numbers, the height, perspectives, and those are some of the other things we're going to discuss. They've also found through a study at the University of Michigan was that if you sketch and draw these, it helps in understanding the process. So we're going to have a number of examples in class and in a workbook to show you how to do that. The way the 10-module e-learning course is going to be structured is that there's a pre-test before you take the course. It's an online questionnaire. It takes you about 20 minutes. Then there are going to be 5 or 10 modules depending on how it's structured. Some students will have 5 weeks, 10 weeks. They'll work in teams. There's a software module. Every week you're only going to spend about 50 minutes. 5 to 20-minute lecture, you work on some examples in a group, and then that's over with. These can all be done online. Then they're going to, as I mentioned, pre- and post-test. We're going to see afterwards whether or not we made any improvement in your skills. Here's an example of one of the questions. Since this is National Science Foundation grant, Purdue created a standardized online exam that all the schools are using. So we have a standard that all the schools can use to match, some standard skills. Here's an example where they show the first line is that here's an object. It's somehow going to be rotated in 90-degree increments in the X, Y, or Z direction. This one is relatively simple. Y is straight up, and it's rotating around the Y axis. So the question is the first figure is going to be rotated some number of degrees. Take the second object on the second line and rotate it in a similar fashion, and what do you get? So what happens is the first one is actually rotating around the Y-axis, which is straight up, 90 degrees in the left. A positive rotation will be to the right. So we'll teach you all that stuff in the class. So it's going to rotate 90 degrees. If you rotate the second figure, the same 90 degrees, which one of these objects is selected? Now, the ones we can throw out are A and C because those are not rotated in the Y direction. You can see it's being flipped over for the most part along the X. So you got Y up here, X here. So it's being flipped over in the X direction. So those you can throw out immediately. This one is actually being rotated 90 degrees in the other direction. It's going around to the right. So it's obvious that's not the one. The next one is 180 degrees. If you look at the figure on line 2, it's a kind of mirror image of it. So you can tell that's not the one. If you look at this one, it's basically the second figure. Again, we're doing a relationship. If I rotate one object 90 degrees, how would I rotate the second object? What would it look like? So it takes the second object, rotate it 90 degrees, and what it would look like. It'll take some skills, but you'll be able to hopefully do this quickly. Here's a solid one. The exams online are all wireframe, kind of just no colors, relatively a simplistic figure. So if you take this particular object here, same along the y-axis, rotate it, how many degrees is it to rotate it to get to the one on the right? So if you multiplied something 90 degrees, plus 90 degrees, the other was minus 90 degrees, you take it and rotate it in this direction. Okay, that's not what we want. Okay, then you multiply it, rotate it a little bit more, and it looks like this. And then now 180 degrees is exactly a mirror image. So if you can see the first figure, the one on the left, the point is facing behind you. The second one on the right, the point is facing toward you. So actually, you can see that it's actually 180 degrees, or the notch visualized from two different directions are opposite to each other. So that's actually the one. And this is 270 degrees. So that's the answer. We're going to be talking about in this course combining solids. You take two objects together, what do you have? This is really critical in cutting tools, in CNC, computer numerically controlled devices, where basically you have a block and you're going to cut something out for some part that you're going to make. Isometric sketching is basically looking at something on one of the corners and looking at it like at a 30-degree angle so it looks three-dimensional. You don't, as you can see on the second line, you don't look at any of the components, it just surfaces. So the final one is, what does the surface look like? Orthographic projections are basically, you take an object, make a wireframe, and then look at each one of these sides, X, Y, and Z, which are the three on the right, so into a bunch of two-dimensional pictures. Surface of revolution is basically if you took an object and rotated what it would look like. And that's also a cutting tool, is that basically you might be cutting into some other object, or in this example, you might have some object cutting the surface. So in actually making devices, this is really critically important. So this is kind of the end of the introduction. It basically is, we're going to be offering a 5 or 10 week online e-learning course to teach you spatial visualization. You can work at your own speed, and then at the end of the period of time, you'll take a post-test and we'll see how it goes. I hope this is useful for you, and I will be available through email during the course of this tutorial if you have any questions. Thank you very much.